In the discussion so far, I haven't seen anyone address the issue directly of what do you do with people on the autism spectrum. I get into HPC centers and I can tell some really good stories about dealing with people on the autism spectrum. And I know this because I can act that way if I have to, because I'm sort of that way and I'm trying not to act that way much of the time. So would you address that, please?
Yeah, so we had a kid in the last C4C that had Asperger's. So he was on the autism spectrum, and I agree with you. Like they're my people, right? So I work with a lot of people that I think are on the spectrum. I think the thing is, particularly in that challenge, we did not expect him to be anybody other than who he was. However, we did expect him, and he was fine with this, we did expect him to participate. We did expect him to speak publicly. That was an uncomfortable thing for him to do. And we did expect, everybody was expected sort of a code of conduct. That's not to say that people on the spectrum do not behave by a code of conduct. But I think sometimes, particularly when I mentioned the soft skills piece of it, I think people on the spectrum aren't fully understood. And I have a kid on the spectrum, so I can see it. My father was on the spectrum, so really they're my people. And I think part of it is with this particular kid, he was wicked smart, could do anything I asked him to do. Where he got uncomfortable was when we started working on the soft skills, the speaking, the leadership skills, some of the team dynamics, but with this kid, not terribly. But we sort of worked with it rather than fighting it, if that makes sense.
Rob Meyer. We have development teams in multiple locations. Unsurprisingly, they are predominantly male. So does anybody have advice on how you change the culture in those teams to be more receptive to people who aren't like them? And in some cases that's women, in some cases that's people from other countries and things of that sort. But any advice that you've experienced in terms of what helps change the culture to make it more accessible to people who aren't like them?
I can lead it off with, as a leader, what you can do is make sure that all members of the team have an opportunity to participate, and that when someone has a good idea, regardless of where it comes from, if the group tries to, I'm going to say stomp on it for lack of a better phrase, you step in and say, time out, we need to give this a fair shake, because let's talk about the pluses and minuses of the idea, and the origin of the idea is irrelevant. And when people, I think, realize that if they speak up, they've got an opportunity, if what they say has merit, is going to be reinforced and supported, I think you're going to get more of that. And word of mouth works. It leaks out that, all of a sudden that she's a really good person to work for. And your team will grow that way.
Yeah, the other thing that we've done is taken other teams and that are more diverse and had them work together with the teams that's less diverse. So they just have to work with other people that are different, and all of a sudden they're not so scary, and they actually sometimes like it, and then they'll work together more. And it doesn't happen by itself.
So was your question attracting people? So you have no diversity, and how do you kind of infuse diversity? How do you attract diverse groups? Or how do you make people play nice with each other and build a cohesive team with very little diversity that then you want to I couldn't quite tell.
Well, first it's attracting.
Yeah.
And once you get someone,
Yeah.
and it's keeping them there. We had a case recently in the UK where we had a young woman who joined us about 5 or 6 years ago after a PhD program, worked out very well, was very successful, got promoted to a team leader, and then a few months ago decided that what she really wanted to do was retire from HPC and start brewing beer with her husband.
Yeah. So there are two different things. So one thing that we did at TAC to attract people, and we went through a concerted effort, and John West sort of led this. Right after we counted and realized, we're doing pretty good, but we're not doing as good as we would like to do. We went back and looked at all the job postings, all the review comments, all of that, and sort of did an analysis of the low-hanging fruit pieces. Are we keeping people away by the way we phrase the things that we do in the job postings? And it happens, right? But that's a low-hanging fruit. The way you actually sell the job, I think, does matter. Once you get somebody in, here's what I want to emphasize. So mostly male group and ladies, from a female perspective, ladies, you guys can speak up. But it's not, so it's more death by 1,000 cuts. There certainly are very egregious, horrible things that have happened in the past where everybody goes, that was horrible. But that's not oftentimes what breaks you down. What breaks you down is the little stuff that happens all the time. And it almost happens before you know it happens. So, for example, a couple things that I still deal with. So, I'm almost always in an all-male environment. If when I speak up, it's received differently than the way they speak, when they speak up, it's a little thing that I can't really call them on. I can't really, if somebody interrupts me or cuts me off, I can say, just a second, please, or somebody else can. But it's really more insidious than that. And I don't even know that the folks know that they're doing it. You know what I mean? So it's not like there's a villain out there that we wanna go after. There are things, so I have kids. I was the only one. My kids are grown now, so it's not really an issue, but I was the only one in the center that had young kids. So having to be, and whether we like it or not, in my family, I was the primary caregiver. So when there was a sick child, when they had screw with the working parents days, the millions that they do, it was me that bore the burden. And I remember leaving one day, and I spoke to a colleague of mine who I won't name, love him to death, and I said, "Oh, are you heading out?" And he goes, "No, Kelly, some of us have to work. We don't get to leave early and go pick up our kids." So it's like death by 1,000 of those types of cuts. And it's something that I think you have to keep an active eye on. I think anybody who's been through it, we see it and we can speak up, but it's not going to change until the guys also see it and speak up and change the culture, if that makes sense.
So Kelly Nolan, who's actually one of my good friends from Canada, she did a program at Supercomputing this year for male allies. If you see these things happening, what can you do? If you are in a meeting and there's a woman in the meeting and she suggests something and somebody else 2 seconds, like a guy 2 seconds later says the same thing and everyone says, "Oh, that's a brilliant idea." You go and you say, "Well, actually, when Susan said it, she said this, and she was correct." There are ways to do it without pissing other people off, but by proving that you are an ally. And the allies session she did at Supercomputing was overflowing with people. We do appreciate the fact that there are lots of you who want to help and who don't know how yet. And we are very happy to help you learn how to help us because it helps you, right? All of those statistics about how your business will do better if it's more diverse are absolutely true, right? But you have to be willing to make that point. Then you run into the pushback from No offense, some of the white males who think, well, stop pushing for so much diversity, or we hired these 3 people, now we're done, right? Now you're coming after me. No, we're not. A rising tide floats all boats. We're trying to make everyone's life better. So instead of just pushing for diversity, you push for inclusivity. You push for having different, having working parent rules for all the parents, maternity leave and paternity leave, making sure that everyone benefits from it, makes everyone happier, and makes everyone want to stay in your organization.
I think more than anything, I never wanted to feel like this one is not like the other one. You know what I mean? When I walk in, I don't want to feel awkward and weird. I just want to feel like I'm there to get my job done. And when it keeps getting pointed out, I think it just gets tiring over a period of time.
So, can I ask a question then? So, because one of the things that I seem to be in a perpetual state of having to hire people. I'm really happy when I'm down into the low single digits, and then I become successful and get more work, and now I'm into the mid double digits of having to hire people again. So I'm kind of wanting to create any kind of a workforce where I can get anybody who can do the job to come in and do the job. And I find that there's just not a lot of people that have the skills to do that. So how can we create an environment so that we can just be really attractive to people regardless of where they come from? Because I'm willing to take anybody who can do the job.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the skill set is, and I can appreciate that not everybody first coming off the street is ready to do that job. And you want people to succeed and not put them in a position in which they're going to fail. I will encourage everyone to think outside the box with respect to what you evaluate when you see a resume and what skills you think. And when you talk to someone, 9 times out of 10, you know someone that may not check all the boxes, but man, you see a lot of potential there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Not everybody's willing to sort of take that leap, and I think you probably are, but I would encourage folks to think creatively about what might be qualified or about how to get people in. It's going to take a lot of creative approaches to solve the problem.
And where you go to look for people,
yeah.
Right? There's Society of Women Engineers, Society of Hispanic Engineers, Society of Black Engineers. If you're looking for people, go to new places, look under new rocks, advertise in different places,
Yeah.
so that those jobs, those ideas get out there.
So one of the things that I try to do, Jack, is actually not do all the recruiting. I try to get my early career people to do as much recruiting for me as possible. And not only just for the people that are ready to be hired in the next year, but their friends that are 2 or 3 years behind them in university. So I can track them and I can be bringing them through with internships. And then I'm willing to take more risk on a new intern than I am a new hire.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's a risk of reeling this in even further. I'm an advisor to Ohio State's Mechanical and Aero Engineering Department, and they have exactly the same problem attracting students as we do attracting new hires. And it kind of goes back to, I don't think anybody in the room now qualifies because nobody here is going to have small children, but it's the kinds of things that you do when you have small children in terms of, well, gee, I don't want my son to be interested in ballet, and I don't want my daughter taking the lawnmower apart. You know, what's wrong with either one of those?
Well, I know somebody that's got got 2 small kids.
Okay.
And I'll ask first question, and then I'll hand the mic to both.
Generalizing, okay? I mean, what's wrong?
In only the nicest way, the room in here probably has grown-up kids. And you know what that means.
So my name is Rafael Salas. I'm from Chevron. And so I hear a lot of talk about just, I guess, for lack of a better term, work-life balance in a sense, whether it be for women, men, or minorities, right? So in the U.S., you know, our typical work week is, you know, this 8 to 9, you know, 5-day work week. So do you think there's, I guess, value in challenging that, in trying to get managers to be more flexible, in a sense to where, I guess a person can work from home for certain days, or some companies do every other Friday off or something like that.
Yes.
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 Yeah. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence and in fact studies in other countries where they have a 4-day work week and the people are so much happier. They're
More productive.
Would you rather have someone
Yeah.
sitting at their desk playing Candy
Absolutely.
Crush, because they have to be there for 8 hours, or would you rather have them get their work done and go and do something with their family and have a happy life and come back to work the next morning and raring to go? I mean, it's not something we're going to be able to talk a lot of people into yet. That it's the kind of thing you want to start to socialize and see what the results are going to be.
I hate to say it, but Boeing went that route and they reeled it back in. Is it?
The flexibility or work from home? There's a
They
difference.
they killed completely the work from home.
Wow.
I think there's a middle ground. You know what I mean? I also, so my husband's, we have a mixed marriage. My husband's industry, corporate, and I'm academic. So I didn't even know what a bonus plan was until, and he was upset. He was upset when they took the cakes and the snacks out of the break room. And I'm like, what is this thing you call a break room? But they also, when he worked at Sun, they had a work from home program, and then they reeled it back in because it was so hard. But it's almost like they overcorrected. Like, there can be flexibility,
Right.
Yeah.
but you just don't have to do it sort of,
Right, and I think the thing there is you manage the deliverables.
yes.
Right.
You
Yes.
set the expectations. This is what we
Absolutely.
need, this is when we need it. You know what? I don't care if you're working at 2 a.m., just as long as the job gets done.
Exactly.
Plus, there's some people who do really well working at home, and there are some people that just
don't.
don't.
Yeah.
And as you said, did you get your work done? Great.
I mean, I've worked both, I worked at the Pentagon. My first meeting was at 6:15 in the morning.
Yeah.
And my last meeting was at, if I was lucky, 7 at night. Not great for the work-life balance when I had spent the previous 6 months deployed. So those two challenges happen. But working from home is in many respects a leadership challenge for management. You have to be able, as we've said, set defined work expectations. In the Washington, D.C. area, for some people that I let work at home, they can get more work done because they're not spending 4 hours a day commuting back and forth.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the wear and tear that happens. So you have to adjust it. But working from home does reduce collaboration.
Yeah.
There's no walking down to get a cup of coffee and stopping in
Cool
somebody
conversations, yeah.
somebody else's hookah. So you have to be able to work around that and find other ways to do it. I mean, but some type of flexible work arrangement. My wife works 4 10-hour days because that's what she wants to do. She's a physical therapist, so you really can't work from home in that respect. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to needle somebody when you're not right next to them. But we're always working around it. Depends on your job.
I have a question related to demography. So some universities and companies tend to say things like, we'll have this many percent of some group of people by a certain time. And then some people say, what we really need is equity in opportunity rather than equity in results. So may I ask your opinions on that?
Quotas make it difficult. Whenever you have a hard fixed quota, it's challenging. But when I was in the Navy 20 years ago, I was at the staff at Naval Reactors when they decided they would open up the nuclear power field to women. Okay. There was the loud wailing and gnashing of teeth for about 10 minutes, and the admiral said, "Do it," so we did it. Okay. The women that came for interviews at that point, one of them is now the reactor officer in charge of the reactor on one of the aircraft carriers. But she didn't get to be the reactor officer, but as she came out of nuclear power school, she had to work her way through the system. So don't expect 20 years of change to happen in 20 minutes. But if you never take the first step, no one would be there. And I guarantee you within the next 10 years, there'll be a woman commanding a submarine. They started later in the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing to say is that we're so far behind already that I'm not even paying attention to numbers because the fact that our department is at 4 female faculty out of 18 means no matter what, no matter where you think that number should be, we're happy to go more, right? And having more female faculty lets us get more female students. And attracting and being able to mentor more effectively more female students means there are more people that you can hire who are, it makes for a more diverse workforce. And I mean, one thing to reinforce, to go back to one thing to reinforce something Melissa said, we've been more successful in the computer science departments in attracting a diverse faculty. And a lot of that got started by taking people that weren't traditional computer scientists, right? People that had a strong computing background but were coming from biology, whose PhD wasn't a computer science PhD, but were certainly qualified. And one of the things that we had to be very careful about there was saying, okay, you're not coming from a PhD in computer science. What's the appropriate way we will evaluate your career after 6 years when you get to tenure? Because we don't expect your career to look like mine did coming out of a PhD, out of 12 years straight through in graduate school, undergrad to graduate.
So there's something a little embedded in your question. It doesn't have to be one or the other, opportunity versus results. The challenge there is that, and you said it, and that is you have to change your mindset on where am I going to go looking for the people that have the skills to fill the job that I need to do. If I just go to like the Big Ten, I'm probably going to see the same people at each institution, and I'm not going to get a great deal of diversity from one institution to the other. I have to start thinking differently about where I'm going to recruit and how I'm going to. And yours is, who do I send? It's another good point.
I'll address both things because I also think they're separate. So with respect to mandating a number, that is akin to having a quota. And I don't wish, as a minority in this area, being a woman, I don't want to be hired because I check a box. I want to be hired because I bring value. But I want an even playing field. And the playing field isn't even. It's not even close. I'm not going to point to any villain. There's no villain here. It's just a simple fact. So I want an even playing field, an equal opportunity, and I think that's absolutely mandatory. But saying, engineer, saying that I'm going to have 50% of any one kind of person, I don't control all the factors that go into this. I don't control all the things. Why on earth would I take that on? That being said, it is something that I actually look at all the time. I evaluate. How well am I doing? How well does it stack up? It's not a one-time thing. It's this persistent engagement to see, are we where we should be? Are we taking full advantage of the available pipeline as an employer in workforce? Or am I really doing all that I can with the students? Is there something creative that I need to do? It's not to get to a certain number. I have no internal number in mind. I just know that we're, as Patrick said, so far off that I'm trying to work with an even playing field.
So how do you, go ahead, Patrick, then I want to ask a question.
So one of the things we were all talking about a little bit earlier was working with HR and just trying to get HR to reach out in a more diverse way and try to bring in candidates for us. And maybe, I'm just thinking here, maybe they should be also looking at those metrics of who's applying and whether or not we're being really effective at getting the message out to people. Because I can't tell somebody they have to apply to a job I have, but are we getting the message out and making sure that people understand we're open and willing to hire people?
And I think another point is a lot of these a lot of the best practices that Kelly was talking about in terms of how you draft ads and how you evaluate candidates, HR in many cases is well behind the curve on this, right? So, UNM has been struggling with this where our advance office has done a lot of work to figure out how do you recruit effectively from diverse populations, and then we turn around and look at what HR requires us to do in terms of how we evaluate candidates or what we must put in ads, and they're completely at odds.
Yeah.
The second thing, which something we struggle with as an institution, is that the result of wanting diverse hiring committees places an additional service burden on the diverse members of our workforce. So, for example, you want to have appropriate numbers of women or minorities on your hiring committee, and you're understaffed on women and minorities. What that means is that there's a huge burden of service separate from research, separate from teaching, on which they're going to be evaluated at tenure, placed on them, which sets them behind the curve on the papers they publish, on the grants they bring in, right? And all of this compounds another one of those lots of little cuts that makes the whole system very difficult. And it's something we struggle with. And and HR rules that mandate you must have this can work against that too.
So that means you need to modify your reward system.
Yes.
And
It does.
beware of bias and automatic resume screening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
If you have never taken the unconscious bias quiz online, just Google unconscious bias. There is a website where you can go, and it takes a couple minutes, and it asks you for different topics. Do you associate that with male or female? Different colors, and it's just do it without thinking. You just click, A or B, whether you're gonna, and it tells you whether you're biased in one way or another. And they are things that even if you think that you are the most unbiased person in the world, you'd be very surprised.
Everyone's biased.
Everyone has biases. It's a question of how we choose to address them.
So what are the great tricks that you guys have found to retain the best people? So let's just assume we managed to find people. How do you retain them? How do you develop them?
You have to invest in them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And it's not, money is one thing, but training, opportunities that.
Mentorship.
Mentorship, making, giving them a challenging job. And never assume that somebody knows how to be a leader. If you're going to promote somebody to leadership,
Right.
make sure they've had some training. You can end up disastrous on both sides.
You find out what's important to them. You get to know them and what's important for them for their career, and you foster it.
You have to be really flexible.
Yeah, you do.
Flexibility, yeah.
Really flexible and make sure it's interesting, whatever they're doing.
Right.
Kent?
I have a success story. Had a girlfriend a while ago, and she's fairly big in biology. She graduated from Radcliffe, by the way, because they wouldn't let women into Harvard. And then she ended up to be a rather well-known biologist. She wrote a book called Genetics, and it was used for over 10 years as the text everywhere you took biology. So she's fairly well-known. So she started Women in Biology, okay? And if she found a conference where the panel members where women weren't well represented, she called up the guy running the conference. She said, "I'll let you get by this time, but if I don't see women on the next one, I'm shutting down your conference." Because, if Ursula Goodenough got in your way, you're in trouble, okay? But that's what it took, and biology is much better at conferences, is much better well-balanced because of that now. So just let you know, it does happen.
There's a website, there's a group called 500 Women Scientists. And there's a website where they have a database now of women scientists, and women can put themselves in there, and you put your science and your expertise in there, and if somebody needs a panelist for something, they can go there and look. The reason we had a Women in HPC workshop at the Rice Oil and Gas HPC meeting last month was because poor Jan Odegaard organized the meeting in 2018 and publicized his list of speakers, and they were all men. And he felt it more than anyone else, what a horrible thing that was, and changed this list of panelists for 2019. And we had a women in HPC workshop. If you recognize it and you're willing to do something about it, there are ways.
So I'll tell you a story that's a little bit like this. So I'm in the Viz community, so the IEEE Viz community, and maybe 3 years ago, and this is very male, right? So very, very male. But it's a community I've grown up in. And we had this big paper on the death of scientific visualization. There's a big panel, all guys. One Asian guy, all the rest were white guys, which will become relevant later. But they did this whole panel on why scientific visualization wasn't going to die, and then they opened it up for questions. And this one young lady who was a student, who couldn't have been more than maybe 19 years old, got up and, kudos to her, in a room full of probably 500 people. So really brave to get up. I couldn't have done it at that age. And she said, what I would like to know is, nobody's mentioned diversity or inclusion. How do you think that factors in? They look like deer caught in the headlights. Like, there's a lot of stammering. Each of them gave sort of this pat answer because they were caught flat-footed. And then the last guy said, well, I mean, I'm a minority, the Asian guy. I'm a minority, so I think we're doing fine. Which I lost my mind. I got up, because you can see the audience. Like, I got up, and I went up to the podium, and I said, with all due respect, you can see the audience. We are not fine. I can count the 2 African Americans we have. I could probably count the women. I mean, we're going through the room. We are not fine. That then set up, and I got lots of texts like, you go girl, way to go, because I really went on sort of this mini tirade. Out of that, the next year, because we put them on notice, basically, it was the same kind of thing. We put them on notice, like, I'm done. And I was senior and couldn't get hurt. So I could stand up. And I just sort of at that point owned my role and realized that I had a responsibility. If there was going to be a change, it wasn't going to happen, by some other magic mechanism. The next year, we had a panel on diversity, and we started having this conversation, and what just got released was a book that a group of us wrote on diversity and inclusion in the visualization community, which it applies to all of computer science. And it's a published book that goes through all of the sociology, all of the reasons why it's good, best practices, all of these different kinds of things. And it was all a result of that brave young woman standing up and asking a question, and the rest of us recognizing that we weren't going to get any better if somebody didn't do something drastic and very active. So kudos to her. I had one of those moments. I should have had it much earlier on. But you just don't sort of realize. You keep going on and on and on. But I think people want to do the right thing. Sometimes they don't know how, and they don't really recognize if everybody looks like them, they don't really think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just one final comment. I would hear in these conversations, and they would say, well, we couldn't find any qualified women for this particular one. And she would say, okay, I'll send you 20 names.
Yeah.
That's
And I expect
Yep.
most of them on your panel next time.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So
Yeah.
it was great. Thank you.
And good for her for starting it.
Thank you, Bob. Hi. Some of the members on the panel have presented a pretty compelling case in terms that there's a huge pent-up demand for the kinds of people that we need to fill this field. I don't see a lot of evidence that there's a huge pent-up supply out there. And we're looking at this as if this is 100% the responsibility of the people who are looking at demand. What kind of activities can you do to ensure that there is a steady, vibrant supply of people across all the range of diversities and genders and other backgrounds to feed this pent-up demand? It shouldn't all be the responsibility of the people in this room to ensure that the supply changes as well, or does it?
So if it's, whose responsibility would it be? I mean, we're the ones with the demand.
We seem to be concentrating on the demand issue.
Yeah.
Are we looking at socioeconomic conditions for the people that we're trying to attract to this field?
It's not all socioeconomics, though. I agree with, it is a multi-pronged problem, for sure.
Yeah.
But I have a demand. I want it filled. I know that more diverse teams make more creative solutions.
I understand all those things you're talking about demand, though. I'm saying.
But that's good for me.
Right.
Okay,
So I'm part of the solution.
okay, I don't know. You can create
This-
a perfect
well, so-
society to attract people, but if there's nothing in the supply chain, then that's ineffective.
But I've already shown there's something in the supply chain.
Yeah.
I don't believe there's nothing in the supply chain.
Bob, can I
So you're
take,
saying there's a huge wave of people who are being kept out?
No, no, no.
No.
She's saying that she understands that it's partially her responsibility to go and create some of the supply. She owns the demand side of it. She's got to balance that equation. I feel the same compelling drive. And so I'm making investments.
And that's why we're going to K-12 schools. That's why
Right.
we're working
That's
Yeah.
with teacher professional development, is to create
Yeah.
that supply. Right.
The supply
Now,
demand.
the other half of supply that we're supplying them in balance is based on price, right? So the other way to do that is if you want more supply, there will be investments that will lead to increased demand. It will
Right.
lead to increased supply.
Absolutely.
I think
Right.
part,
That
part of
supply
the
will
answer
create
to this,
itself.
Bob, let me know if this scratches at least partially your itch, but it goes back to something that you said, Keith, and that is engineers, technical people, I think fundamentally want two things, and I think it's pretty much independent of origin. They want rewarding work. They want challenging, rewarding work. And then they want to be recognized for it when they do it.
Yeah, I think that's universal.
And I think if you create that environment, people will see that. It's one thing to say, I have a position that I need to fill. It's a completely different thing to create an environment that people say, I want to be there. You need to have both.
And programs like Lena's that do things here for K-12 kids, and we did a Girl Scouts program at TAC last weekend. We brought a bunch of Girl Scouts in. We taught them how to code in Python to do one simple thing. We gave them 5 or 6 mentor women who they could talk to about how did you get into this field? What do you do in your job? Why did you do this? Showing them that there are people who look like them doing this gives them the idea that it may not be such a bad thing. The math may not be so hard, and I had a couple of girls say to me, math is hard. And I had a couple of girls saying, I love math. And you just, find the balance of where you can do the most good. If that means, you have a daughter or a granddaughter who's in Girl Scouts and you can bring them and show them a supercomputer and talk to them about what it is and what it means, that makes a difference. Sparking that in them at a young age makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing to say is that had I not, so coming from the background that I came from, I didn't know what a possibility was. So it wasn't like I was sitting out there thinking I want to be a computer scientist, from a very young age. There were a couple of key critical things that happened in my life just fortuitously. One was I had parental support that said, look at all opportunities. And this is, and my dad actually recognized in me an aptitude for computer science very, very early on. And I wanted to be a vet. I was very adamant about wanting to be a vet, and I was wrong, actually. He was right, I was wrong. But, the other thing was when I got into the program, when I was there, and it was difficult, and it took a lot of resilience, it was an ex-Navy professor that saw something in me that I didn't see. And if those two things had not happened, I think I can say with fair certainty that I'm not sure I would be where I am. So in large part, that feeds my responsibility to do the same. But I don't necessarily think that people are out there always consciously saying, I don't want to do X. I think there is this perception that a computer scientist looks like whatever, and this is what they do, when in reality, we all know that there are a million different things that you can do, and tech skills really almost should be mandatory, because that's sort of where we're going. So I don't necessarily, maybe we'll get to the point, what a great day that would be, if people actually consciously made an informed decision to say, I don't really want to do that, that's not interesting. I don't know that we're there yet, is part of why I'm so actively involved.
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, I mean, that takes a lot of investment in these young people, and you have to wait 5 to 10 years to even see this return on the investment. One idea that I'm playing with right now is giving Raspberry Pis to students, to high school students, but really sit with them for a summer camp for a week or two, teach them different coding with the Raspberry Pi, and then hand it to them, but then try to keep up with them once a month, maybe during the school year, and see what they're doing with it. I've seen programs where they hand them computers, but then they don't follow up on it too. But if you look at London, England, Australia, they give them Raspberry Pis from kindergarten on. The computer science program starts in kindergarten, and we're not there yet. We're not here. And one of my biggest people that resist our programs are the traditional schools, teachers, and superintendent and principals. So we do most of our programming after school, weekends, summers. So it's considered informal and non-traditional, and it's, there's a big problem there. I do want to point out something else about HR. Our organization is a volunteer-based, and I have a lot of women that believe in what we're doing, and they're helping me out. But you know where they come from? They are women who are very smart and who have tech degrees, one STEM degree, but had stayed home with and raising their children for 5, 10 years, 15 years. Nobody's hiring them when now they're ready to be hired. Mm-hmm. Their tech skills are outdated. I even know a friend of mine who had a PhD, and I might have this reversed. She has a PhD in applied math, raised her children. They went to college. Her degree is no longer applicable, and now she's back at UNM getting another PhD in either computer science, or it's the other way around. She had computer science, and now she's doing applied. Do you know Vanessa?
Computer science.
Yes, yeah. Vanessa, yeah.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, Vanessa, right, a friend of mine. And she's one of my biggest volunteers and STEM role model, but because she's like, okay, I have a PhD, I'm a smart woman, I have a PhD in a tech field, but nobody would hire me now. So look for those people, look for these women who you could hire them and retrain them, and they'll be very loyal, and they won't go another job.
We're over time. Lena, I have a program for you. Yeah.
We probably have hit the buzzer.
Yep. Meh.
Earl, Steve, y'all have any last questions? Any last statement you guys want to make? Okay, I think that is about as good as we can ask. Earl.
I'd like to repeat my original question to Melissa and change it just a little bit.
Okay.
And that's basically, is it the federal government or the state or the local government were to do something, and when I say something, you mentioned the $299,000, add 2 zeros to it. Make it 30 million.
Yeah.
But my question is, from a big viewpoint, you showed a shortage number there that had a lot of zeros to it. And I agree with addressing, the smaller bars in your chart, but if you really want to solve that problem, you also have to address that tall bar. So how would you spend $30 million a year if that was given to us?
Raspberry Pis and programming for every kid.
Well, I mean
that's facetious, but.
At the state, so the state and local level are the only ones who are ever going to be able to make any impact on K through 12. So we have zero influence on K through 12. And I think there is so much, particularly in Texas, I could speak to Texas, but other states I think are similar. They've got sort of this core competency, and they don't go outside the box. So there is no sort of ability to be creative and teach, and we don't really pay our teachers very well in the K through 12 system, right? That's a state and local thing, and maybe a titch federal. There are certainly for 30 million, you know, if you were going to try to look at all pieces of the pipeline, you would have to have everybody involved because no one agency actually controls all those pieces. I think certainly in formal learning and the formal courses, personally, I think the tech sector, the courses should be taught where you talk about the motivation and you talk about the applications, and then you teach in the context of something people care about. That's how people are going to learn and really, and you can learn the theory, just you don't have to lead with the formulas. You know what I mean? They do real things. But I think it's a multi-pronged approach that no one set of people can fix.
Right, I mean, you have to reach out to the teachers who are going to teach
Yeah.
K-12.
Yeah.
You have to provide them ongoing support and mentorship and learning
Yeah.
communities. You have to provide them materials. You have to track and follow and support the students as they move from, you know, elementary school to middle school to high school to associates or, you know, or 4-year.
Yep.
You have to develop them and mentor them and support them the entire way through. And $30 million would be a start.
Yeah, it's a drop in the
Right,
bucket.
I mean, but to like doing that in this state, which is not, you know, 2 million people in the state, $30 million would be
Not enough.
not enough to really do it systemically across all K-12 in the state.
Yeah.
It would be a big jump up from where we are, and it's something the state is investing some in. There was actually some money in the most recent budget that I hope our governor is going to sign that funds ongoing professional development for computer science teachers at the high school level for PED. You know, we'll see what PED does with that. Right.
Yeah.
Right, you know, licensing, certification, materials, learning communities, that, I mean, just all of that is huge.
So can I ask a question of the academic world?
There aren't that many of us, but yeah, here.
So from the academic world, how many of the students who are in chemistry, biology, psychology, other places, geophysics, thank you, Keith, learn to program and learn computational thinking skills? Because I have to have people who have domain expertise in this in the sciences, but they've got to have computational skills. If you don't have digital skills today, I have people who have been with PhDs in molecular biology, and they come out and then they go do something else, and they come and they apply to me, and I go, can you do this? And if you can't log on to your PC, it's really hard for me to have you come in and work on my high-performance computing system. And I'm willing to train people and help them, but there's got to be enough of a core basic. And
Yeah.
I'm not really seeing, I mean, it seems to me like there's a gap there, even at that level, that's really hurting.
So
At TAC, we did it, so there was a gap. The CS department at UT Austin is very theoretical, top 10, but very theoretical. So the applied skills were not there at all. So what we did at TAC was we teach those courses for free because we saw that gap there. And now what Melissa was talking about was that sort of core competency that's in there, but we had to do it.
And two things that I'm doing, going off and trying to hire first or second year graduate students in geophysics, in reservoir simulation, in rock physics, bring them in as HPC interns. They're going to be interns in our domain science, their third or fourth year grad program. What I'm trying to do is train my customers.
Yeah.
The second is when I hire a mathematician or a computer scientist, I'm going to put them right next to the domain scientists. I'm going to send them to all of the same conferences. I'm going to put them through as many workshops and training opportunities as I possibly can, because that overlap is where creativity happens.
right, but to answer your initial question, almost none. Right, but to answer your initial question, you know, at most state universities, have moved to 120 credit hour curriculums where, we want them out in 4 years. We want to get them out. And so all the sciences, the amount of math, the amount of domain science they need to cram into that, along with gen ed in 120 hours, doesn't leave a lot of space. Things that we are doing, we're starting to actually make gen ed computer science classes so they're non-chemistry. Gen ed science is a computer science class. Right? We're trying to work with them to integrate computation in their core classes, but when you're talking about an undergraduate degree in a domain science, there's a lot of material that their faculty want to cram into their brains in 4 years. And so how to balance that is challenging. And to get to the funding issue that Kelly brought up, NSF has a call out now, the IUCUE call.
Oh, yes.
Right, for how to integrate computation broadly across the undergraduate curriculum. The funding is $300,000 for 2 to 4 institutions for 2 years.
So a lunch, basically.
So I think we better stop. I realize there's enough energy that if we order pizza, we could probably go long into the evening. But we better turn it over to Paul and Earl.
Okay, and I'm going to be bad guy and add some of my own comments. Sorry. A couple of years ago, we were over in Europe and at LRZ. And I think the story was all incoming undergraduate students had to take a 2-week computational science course before the semester started. Also, a couple of years ago when I was at CUNY, I took a look at some college curriculums, and I saw an imbalance. The schools on the West Coast of the United States tended to have more integrated computational science requirements than schools on the East Coast of the United States. And in fact, in one college catalog, it said, we expect, this was in mechanical engineering, we expect our incoming students to have a knowledge of computing technology, and the faculty should incorporate the requirements for use of computers in their classes. So, this is not something that needs to be an add-on to the curriculum. It's got to be part of the curriculum.
Well, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah,
there, Paul.
absolutely.
And I think TAC, if my memory serves me right, I saw a presentation a number of years ago from TAC, how the computing center started the courses and taught the faculty because the faculty didn't want to do it.
That's right.
Our staff still teach the courses.
We did it
They're not faculty.
we did it for free
Yeah.
because we thought it was important.
Okay, so time unfortunately is up. We could go another day on this topic at least. But I want to thank the panel members. I'd like to thank the audience for being very attentive. And of course, our sponsors for the last 2 days. There's all the presentations are up on the website, so you can download them at your leisure. We're working on getting them a little better organized. That's going to take a little while, but they're there, and you can download them, and feel free to do so. For steering committee members, we have a meeting at 5:45 in the exchange room. And if my memory serves me right, if your back is to the reception desk, you go to your right and there's a hallway, and you go all the way down and you'll see some elevators on your right, and you go down that little hallway and then make a little turnaround like a J. And I'll see the steering committee members there. But again, thank you all.